All right, today we're going to move away from talking about the history of journalism and talk about writing feature stories. In part, I just want to have provide you with a little bit of information since you're going to be involved in writing your own feature story for the course. So feature stories are different from hard news stories, and we'll talk about that here in the lecture video. But I hope that you'll see that this is that neither hard news writing, nor feature stories, nor opinion writing, or any of these types of journalism on their own make up a complete field of journalism, but that all of them add something different to the overall mix of what we're providing for our audience. So hope you enjoy the video, and we'll see you next time. So we've been talking this week about the history of journalism, and I'm going to take a bit of a turn now and talk about feature writing, which is a complement and stands as a bit of a contrast to straight news writing or hard news writing. Feature stories typically fall more in the understanding of what people think about when you think about reading a story. As opposed to the very straightforward detached news article. So feature stories generally carry a lot more human emotion in them, a lot more rich human interest to them, incorporate more narrative devices. But I think that the discussion of feature stories actually fits quite well with a discussion of journalism across history. You'll notice that the title for this week's module is Journalism Through the Years, Real Stories, Real People. And when you think about how information has been presented from one person to another throughout history, whether it be in hard news or soft news, human interest features, or news bulletins, or whatever it might be, it really comes down to telling the stories about the lives that people live and the things that affect them. And so feature stories really dig deeply into that human experience, again, in a way that hard news stories don't try to do. They serve different functions, and they approach news and information about our world in somewhat different ways. Okay, so what are features? Features are sometimes referred to as soft news. If you think back to our lecture video on news values and how I set that up with a discussion of the hard news, soft news, storytelling spectrum, you'll remember that on the one side we had soft news, which generally incorporated more narrative devices and included feature stories. And on the other side, we had hard news, which was generally more the telling of breaking news, matters of governmental policy, crime, car accidents, local affairs, that sort of thing. But soft news, while again is sometimes used to refer to feature stories, does not mean that features have to be fluffy. Soft news doesn't mean that it has to be insignificant. In fact, some of the best journalistic writing out there has come in the way of these really powerful, rich feature stories. Along those lines, then, contrary to popular impression, feature stories are not easier to write than hard news. Many times, young writers who come into journalism are attracted to features because they allow for more opportunity of, I suppose, descriptive writing. And sometimes young writers get frustrated by what they see as a rather rigid form and structure to straight news writing. And they think, oh gee, if I could only write feature stories, I would be able to spread my wings and write what I really want to, and write in the way that I'm actually most talented. And sometimes that's true, but sometimes it's just a misconception of what's required in feature writing. Feature writing requires a great deal of time in the field because this is not creative writing in the sense of just being able to manufacture and come up with whatever ideas you think would be most entertaining or interesting to the reader, because this is still journalism. This is still 100% fact-based. We have to find ways of applying these narrative techniques to absolute factual information. And doing that requires that you have a wealth of time spent in the field, extensive notes, that you've really immersed yourself in understanding the topic or the people that you're writing about. But features are found in all sorts of publications. Certainly they're found in newspapers, they're found online. You can find them in newsletters. And they have been the backbone of good magazine writing for many, many years. This is where you'll find a lot of the longer, very rich, detailed feature stories that really capture an essence of the human experience. Okay, so what's the value of feature stories? Why would we bother spending this time in the field and immersing ourselves and going through the extensive process of collecting information to write these very detailed and generally longer feature stories? Well, as I said at the beginning, features complement hard news, and so readers often want very straightforward news articles that follow the inverted pyramid and give them the news of the day in a very direct, no nonsense form, if you will. But they also like features that, as I say, incorporate more of what we understand as traditional storytelling techniques and speaking something to the reader about what life is like for other people out there sharing this planet with us. So it connects with people on a human level, and really helps to personalize many of the current events in a very real human way that we relate to the people in these feature stories. Features also are able to dig deeper into issues because, again, they oftentimes run longer than a hard news story will. And so there's a lot of opportunity for delving into the nuance and the complications of a particular story or issue. And so the greater length and the higher degree of human interest and emotional content involved helps to connect the reader and help the reader make sense of a topic in a richer and broader way than by a straight news article alone. So the structure of a feature story is different than the structure of a hard news story. It does not follow the inverted pyramid where we would structure information from most important to least important, but it follows a narrative thread, and so there's a constant push and pull of tension, dramatic tension in the story, of dramatic reprise, returning to themes again and again in a story to try to emphasize some central point. The use of foreshadowing and metaphor and concentration on style and tone. All of these are examples of some of the literary devices that are applied, again, to absolute 100% nonfiction information, but to give it a narrative quality to present as a feature story. But in doing this, as the writer weaves through these crests and valleys of the story and engages in a push and pull of tension with the reader, the writer must have a strong central focus. The reader needs to feel confident that the writer sees the bigger picture and understands what's going on all along the way, and that they don't feel like they're getting lost in the weeds, and that there's a greater overall central point involved in the story. So speaking of keeping a focus and making sure that we have a command of the story, a couple things that feature stories are not. They're not opinion writing. So while they may carry more personal perspective or personal tone in them, they don't carry the same persuasive sense of commentary that we find as explicitly in opinion writing. Certainly, it's not fiction. Again, we're talking about journalism, so we're talking about sticking to the facts entirely. This isn't poetry, right? So, yes, while literary devices are included, and certainly over the years, there have been instances where journalists have incorporated poetry in their work to a small degree. Generally speaking, that's not the genre that we're working in. But feature stories are also not loose with the facts, and sometimes students or writers coming out of a creative writing tradition can misunderstand as being what some people call creative nonfiction, and those terms get blurred quite a bit, and the boundaries are sometimes a bit more gray than they are distinct. But when we talk about feature writing, particularly in this course and as a part of journalism, again, we're sticking to the facts. So just because we're looking for more description and more rich detail, that doesn't mean that we can manipulate those details because we think that they would work better for the overall narrative. A few common examples of feature stories are the profile, or what's called the personality profile. This is actually the bread and butter of feature writing. This is one of the most common styles of feature writing that you'll find, and of course it's the feature writing assignment that you've been given for this course. And following the overall idea of feature writing, profiles dig into the experience of one individual, or sometimes you'll see perhaps a profile on a couple, say like a married couple, or you may find a profile, what we would call a profile on a small group of people. But generally speaking, when we say profile, we mean a profile on one single person, an individual. And it's really trying to make that person come to life on the page. It's doing more than telling the reader about that person. It's making the reader feel as if he or she knows that person on a personal level. So the profile is one of the most common types of feature writing that you'll find in journalism. There's also a how-to feature that you'll find, which is sometimes we call this a service article because it provides the reader with some very practical information about how to do something, how to complete a research paper, or how to change the oil in your car, or something like that. So how-to features can oftentimes be a little bit more nuts and bolts in nature, and this is one example actually of features that may or may not carry as strong of a emotional human interest component, but are still classified as features. You'll also find feature stories that carry seasonal themes, and so if it's Christmas time, you might find features that look at the diversity of ways that Christmas is celebrated around the world. You might find a feature on how to present a patriotic celebration for the 4th of July, or for Veterans Day or Memorial Day or something like that. Fun things to do for the beginning of summer. Anything that sort of carries with it, again, this sort of seasonal component can make for the foundation of a feature story. You'll also see behind the scenes features. So this would be where we take someone behind the scenes to look at how a toy top is made, the little spinning tops. Maybe there's a behind the scenes story on that, or maybe it's a behind the scenes very literally about what goes into an Emmy Award-winning television sitcom and delves into the interpersonal dynamics, the relationships that that actors may share off the screen. But something that gives the reader a sense that they're getting in on something that's not generally known to the public, to the average person, that they're getting a behind-the-scenes look at something. Or we have historical features. Again, these are just some examples, but a historical feature, pretty straightforward, is something that takes some event or perhaps a historical place and delves into the story behind that event or that place. And so people love to hear about how history has sort of brought us to where we are now, and there's a lot of rich human interest, a lot of full human stories that are told anytime we talk about history. So again, those are just some examples of different types of feature stories. There's many, many more. But since you'll be working on a personality profile, here's a few tips for how to write a good profile. You want to make sure you have the buy-in of whoever it is that you are interviewing, whoever it is that you're doing the story on. If you can't get that access, you're not going to be very successful at writing the story, obviously. And when I say buy-in, they need to understand that, again, this is more than just sort of the wham bam, quick and dirty news article. This is going to be an immersive experience that requires you to interview them, but also to observe them, right? So not always asking them questions, but just spending time with that person to see how they act and to see what kind of person they are. Again, you want to make sure you have a strong focus. Everyone has a story to tell, certainly that's true, but you need to find the hook for the reader. You need to make it clear, why is this story going to be interesting? Why is it going to be worth my time to read this as a reader? So make sure you have a strong focus that guides all of those details, that guides those vignettes and anecdotes that you tell in your overall profile. That it helps guide any kind of research or background factual information that you're providing in your story. You may find that you have to follow up with further interviews and research, right? Again, feature stories take time. Simply going out and speaking to a subject one time is likely not going to be enough. And with all of that information and with your focus, you'll need to think about how to structure that story, right? So again, because we don't have the inverted pyramid to fall back on, you have to think much more carefully about how one section of the story is going to lead to the next. Finding rich details about your subject can go a long way to helping to make them come alive on the page. Recreating scenes as you observe them or as they're told to you can be a really powerful way to put your reader there in the moment with you, or as you're telling the story about this person. Getting the person's voice into the story by way of quotes and dialogue is also a very powerful way to make your subject come alive on the page. But you ultimately want to give your readers a reason to care about that person, and that they walk away with a full understanding, not just about that person, but about who they are. And because you're asking them to stick with you for a longer time than they would with a news article, you need to promise them a payoff in the end, and then deliver on that promise. So that's some of the basics of writing a profile, and the purpose of assigning you this type of story in our courses is to give you a chance to try your hand at feature writing, and to have the experience of writing both hard news and soft news, or and feature stories. So I hope that this goes well for you, and I am here to work with you. Again, this is a more immersive process. You may find that the reporting involved is more difficult, and so certainly, by all means, please get in contact with me as you're going through the process, and I'll be happy to work with you through it.